Welcome back, listeners. Back to Occult Archives. You know, where we go digging into those sometimes misunderstood books throughout history.
Yeah, the books that have really shaped beliefs and sparked a bit of controversy along the way.
Right. Maybe even holding some deeper truths about, all of existence and everything.
Exactly. And today we've reached episode 143.
It's a big one. We're diving into the architecture of existence. Annie Besant on sound, fire, and the cosmos. Big topic today.
Enormous topic indeed.
So for this deep dive, our lovely listeners sent in some fascinating material. The work of Annie Besant, her lectures compiled in The Building of the Cosmos and other lectures, delivered way back in February 1894.
1894, yeah.
So with all that in hand, our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to try to understand some of these really mind-bending ideas.
Yeah, these are big ideas, and it's important, I think, to remember the context a little bit here. So when Besant was presenting these ideas to the world, Europeans were just starting to really engage with Hindu scriptures.
Yeah.
And there was a real struggle to kind of understand and validate them. Some people saw the philosophical depth, but, others, even really dedicated scholars, figures like Max Mueller, sometimes dismissed them.
Yeah.
They questioned whether there really was any deep esoteric wisdom hidden in the symbolism.
Yeah, almost like a bias towards, could something this profound really come from a culture that they didn't fully understand?
Exactly. And Besant's goal, right, was to challenge that very perspective. She wanted to show that these weren't just old stories, but that Hindu scriptures held this incredible, rich knowledge of philosophy, science, and religion. And what's really interesting is her argument that Western science is essentially rediscovering a lot of these ancient ideas.
It's wild, like it's coming full circle.
Yeah, full circle. And a central figure for Besant in this revealing of ancient wisdom was Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, HPB. And she really credits Blavatsky with providing the keys to understanding these scriptures, unlocking their inner meaning. Her value isn't in showing off the marvelous or the sensational. It's in unveiling these secrets.
Okay, so let's get into this building of the cosmos bit. Besant starts by talking about, what was there before the origin of things? And she's not talking about just, empty space, right? This is, the state before anything manifested or became distinct.
Right, before things separated out. And she points out that even Western science acknowledges this idea of a fundamental one, a unity that we can't really wrap our heads around.
Right.
But what's fascinating is that the Hindu concept goes even deeper than that. So beyond Brahman, which is already described as invisible, intangible, beyond that is Parabrahman.
Parabrahman?
Sometimes called unmodified Vishnu, right? Which is the absolute reality, the ultimate source. So beyond our understanding, you can't even really talk about it or think about it.
Right, because it's the source of Brahman itself.
Exactly, yeah.
So then from the state of pure potentiality, you get this first movement, right? This Besant describes it as the first quiver in the darkness. And this quiver is light, the beginning of everything.
Yeah, it's like the first stirring of existence. And when this Brahman isn't just one thing, it's got this inherent threefold nature.
Threefold?
Whether you call it truth, knowledge, infinity, or, the classic Sat-Chit-Ananda, the existence, bliss, thought.
Sat-Chit-Ananda.
Different ways of looking at that triplicity.
That three in one kind of thing.
Yeah, that ultimately becomes the universe as we know it.
Okay, so where does the Vishnu Purana fit into all this? I know that's one of the sources we're looking at today, too.
Yeah. So the Vishnu Purana gives us a specific sequence for how this unfolding happens. The very first thing that comes into being is Kala, time.
Time.
And it's interesting because it's described as neither matter nor spirit, but it's there even when matter and spirit disappear. So it's like the underlying framework.
It's the container for everything else to happen.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And then you have the second stage, Pradhana Purusha. So this is the essence of matter and the essence of spirit. It's like the one becoming two.
Okay.
And this duality is, what makes the cosmos possible. Besant even compares this to the logos.
Right.
And Pradhana, so matter, is characterized by extensibility, its potential for form, and Purusha is the active force that shapes it.
Okay, so that's That's the active and passive principle coming into play there.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And then the third stage is Mahat, which is like the controlling intelligence, the overruler, if you will, guiding this evolution.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that Besant mentions Professor Huxley here,
Yeah.
Even after he was agnostic for a while, he spoke about this pervading intelligence. So it's almost like, even Western science is catching up to these ancient ideas.
That's like, see, we told you.
Right. Exactly. And Besant is very clear that these three stages, Kala, Pradhana, Purusha, and Mahat, are really just the unfolding of that initial one, the Sat-Chit-Ananda. So Sat, pure existence, Ananda, bliss. That comes from the duality of Purusha and Pradhana. And Chit, that's Mahat manifesting as cosmic intelligence.
Okay. That makes sense. So it's like this potential becoming actualized through these stages.
Right, exactly.
Now, she points out that there's a slight difference when you compare this to the Upanishads, which often
Yeah.
goes straight from this like latent Brahman to the spirit within us, the individual logos.
Yeah. So the Upanishads, their focus is really on this unity between the individual spirit and the source. They present a very direct path. But you can still see hints of this threefold concept.
Oh, okay.
Like in the Mundaka Upanishad, you have life Ananda, mind Chit, and then the elements. Or in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it talks about life, name, form. And in the Kathopanishad, there's this progression from manas to buddhi to atma and then beyond to the unmanifested. So, the core message is still about unity, but it's also about understanding the stages of this manifestation.
So the journey from the one to the many.
Exactly.
Okay, so this brings us to the logos as the builder. And that's where sound comes in, right? Besant explains that it's through uttered sound that the logos actually creates all these forms.
Right. And she dives into the three logo, which she connects to the ancient Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva.
Right, although they're not exactly the same thing here, right?
Yeah, it's like a different take on the concept.
Okay.
So the first logos is completely unmanifest. We can only access it through the spirit within us that is one with it. The second logos is where the one becomes two.
Right. Spirit, matter, Purusha, Pradhana.
Exactly. It's that fundamental unity becoming dual as it manifests.
Yeah.
And you see this beautiful symbolism, right? The sun and moon.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Representing light and fire and water.
Yeah, perfectly capturing that duality. And, Besant points out this idea of the moon being androgynous in a lot of traditions. And that really emphasizes how important this active-passive duality is for creation.
You need both.
You need both. And then you have the third logos, which is Mahat, that ideating power, thought itself. And this duality that started with the second logos is present in every atom.
So every atom has that stamp of the two, of that duality.
Exactly. It's built into the fabric of everything.
Okay. Now, this trinity, it's not just a three-part thing, right? Besant says it has a sevenfold constitution. How does that work?
Right. So the three logoi, they enfold the seven principles. And if you look at the Trimurti and you consider the Shakti, the dynamic aspect of each one, you get 6. And then the 7th is like the synthesizing force that holds it all together.
It's almost like the universe is built on the number 7.
Right. It's this fundamental structure that's woven to everything.
Okay. So from Mahat, this cosmic intelligence, arises ahankara, right? Which I think of as like a cosmic ego, the I amness of the universe.
Yeah. And Besant describes 3 qualities of ahamkara. Sattvic, which is true, pure. Rajasic, which is active, brilliant. And tamasic, which is dark, related to elemental matter.
So this is like the primordial stuff that everything else comes from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Besant, drawing on the Vishnu Purana again, she describes how the elements themselves are created from this tamasic ahamkara.
Okay, how does that happen?
So first you have akasha, and akasha is sound. Then air, which is motion and touch.
Okay.
And from the interaction of akasha and air, you get fire through friction, which she connects to electricity. And then after that comes water and then earth.
Okay. Makes sense.
So let's focus on akasha for a second. Besant keeps saying his main characteristic is sound.
The word, the logos.
Right. And she brings up Subarau's perspective, which describes Vaikarivak as the uttered word. And this is essentially the whole objective cosmos. So the universe is like an expression of the word.
And the power of sound isn't just some cosmic thing, right? It's also fundamental to us as individuals. She says that without sound, there is no form.
Yeah. And sound is the builder, the maintainer, and also the destroyer of forms. It has that triple nature that we see reflected in the Trimurti again.
Right.
She even connects this idea to modern science, saying that Shabda Brahman, the force of sound, isn't just building the cosmos, it's also the power that yogis use to attain their abilities.
Okay. So this power of sound it can both build and destroy, right?
Right. It might seem contradictory, but Besant says that modern science actually supports this idea. So, gentle vibrations can create amazing patterns, while strong vibrations can break things apart.
Yeah, and she uses some good examples to show this, like a glass shattering when you hit its resonant frequency.
Yeah. Or Tyndall's experiments where sound waves alone could shatter a glass rod.
Right, because nothing is truly solid, it's all just vibrations.
Exactly. It's all molecules in motion. And sound can either harmonize those vibrations
Yeah.
or disrupt them completely.
So this means that the ancient Hindu understanding of the sacred word, it's not just some mystical idea, right? It actually has a basis in how the universe works.
Exactly. And, this explains why the misuse of sacred sounds was traditionally forbidden. Because if you're not careful, you can disrupt the harmony instead of creating it.
Right, right. And it's not just about sacred sounds either. Like, Besant mentions the practice of repeating mantras during pregnancy to bring harmony to the developing child.
Yeah, because sound can shape and influence form at a very basic level.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. And, there's even this idea of a new soul returning to Earth and being held in a state of bliss through sound. It's like sound is this underlying force that connects everything.
It's wild. Okay, so let's move on from sound and talk about fire. So Besant reminds us that the great breath, the dynamism of existence, that's what gives Akasha its property of sound.
Right. And when it comes to our senses, all those different things we perceive, it's really just our consciousness interpreting those same fundamental impulses in different ways.
Right, like whether you call it Eastern philosophy or Western science, it all comes down to vibration at the end of the day.
Exactly. And so light, she explains, is just another aspect of this fundamental motion. It's basically interchangeable with sound at a deeper level.
Which makes sense why we see similar concepts expressed through both sound and light.
Right. And Besant even mentions experiments from her time that suggested you could actually convert sound and color. Like there's a deeper connection there than we might realize.
Fascinating. So for this part of the discussion, we're focusing on light as the primary vibration. And Besant says that in the ancient texts, light is often used as a synonym for para-Brahman.
Right. That ultimate reality beyond even Brahman. And here's where it gets really interesting. She says that the term darkness is also used to describe this.
Darkness.
Yeah, because it represents that which is infinite, complete, beyond any kind of expression or separation. It's the source of everything, even light itself.
Okay, that's kind of mind-blowing. So from this primordial darkness, light emerges, but it's formless at first.
Right. Besant quotes the Mundaka Upanishad, which describes Brahman as luminous without form. So it's like this pure idea of light before it takes on any specific shape.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So how does this tie into modern science?
Well, Besant points out that darkness doesn't necessarily mean the absence of motion. It could be vibrations that are too fast or too slow for our eyes to see. So there might be whole realms of existence that we're just not equipped to perceive.
That's trippy. So it's like the scientific concept of motion slowing down to become form is similar to this idea of the unmanifest becoming light.
Exactly. It's a parallel process. And even in the visible universe, there's light we can't see because it's vibrating at frequencies outside our range.
Yeah.
So the whole process of manifestation involves this slowing down of motion within the infinite darkness.
Okay, so first there's this formless light, sometimes called cold flame.
Right. And then from this cold flame comes the second logos.
Mm-hmm.
And light becomes fire. It's no longer formless, and it had heat.
So that slowing down creates heat. And fire, its essence is heat.
Exactly. And fire is the active agent in building the cosmos. But Besant emphasizes that fire can't exist alone. It needs duality. It needs friction. Just like with the second logos, spirit matter, it all comes back to that.
So fire and water, then, they represent the duality of spirit and matter.
Right. And she uses the symbol of the lotus to illustrate this. So you have Vishnu resting on the waters, that's the first logos. And then the lotus growing upwards from his navel, that's the second logos, fire and water together.
The petals are like flames, but it's still rooted in the water?
Yeah, so the lotus represents this creative fire, the womb of creation. And within the lotus is the third logos, Brahma, the active creative force. And as the lotus unfolds, this creative fire builds the cosmos.
Okay, so we've got formless light, then fire, and then this active creative fire that shapes everything.
Yeah. And Besant brings in Blavatsky's writings here, which describe fire as this purest ether. And Blavatsky says there are two fires. One is formless and invisible, like a central spiritual sun, and the other manifests as the cosmos itself.
So it's like that threefold nature again, unfolding into the sevenfold structure of the cosmos.
Right. And then there's the light of the logos to be Prakriti, which is the active creative force.
Yeah.
And the lotus being hermaphroditic, reinforces that idea of duality.
So from that duality comes force, right?
Yeah. And in its lower forms, we see it as electricity, magnetism, heat. And Besant describes this as another action of the great breath, which is often called Fohat.
Right, Fohat.
Hmm.
And it's often symbolized as the fiery serpent.
Yeah. And remember how in Crookes's experiments, the spiral shape appeared when he was working with electricity?
Yeah, I remember that.
It's like that fiery serpent in the cosmic ocean, breathing fire and creating forms.
And then the serpent becomes a circle, tail in its mouth.
Right, which symbolizes the transition from that dynamic creation to the more stable form of the globe.
And then the serpent becomes the cosmic egg, and Brahma emerges from within it.
Right, and sometimes that egg is also symbolized as a lotus. It's all connected.
So many layers of symbolism.
Yeah. And then there's the image of the serpent wrapped around the mountain during the churning of the ocean in the Puranas, which creates life and immortality.
Right. And Besant makes a really interesting point here. She says that by comparing these ancient stories with modern science, we might be able to predict future scientific discoveries.
Yeah, it's like these myths are actually giving us clues about the nature of reality.
It was pretty mind-blowing.
Okay.
So now Besant connects this fire in the cosmos to the spark of life within each of us.
Right. She quotes the Mundaka-Upanishad, which says, "As from a blazing fire sparks proceed, so are produced living souls from the indestructible one." So our individual lives are like sparks from that cosmic fire.
Powerful image. And the
Yeah.
blazing fire is the third logos, Mahat, right?
Exactly. That's the source of those sparks. And those sparks, that's Atma, the higher self. And there's this mystery in occult teaching about whether Atma is actually separate from its source.
Right. Like, is it really cut off, or is that just an illusion?
Exactly. Because from the perspective of Atma itself, there is no separation. It's only when we look at it from our limited human perspective that it seems that way.
Right. Like, imagine standing inside the sun, all the rays would seem like one, but from out here, each ray seems separate.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And so every atom has this Atma, which is also called Jiva when it's embodied, but that separation is Maya, illusion.
Okay. So it's like we're all connected at a deeper level, but we've forgotten it.
Exactly.
And within this cosmic whirlwind of sparks, there are these living flames, the divas.
Right. And these aren't just personified forces of nature. They're actual beings, intelligences, who are involved in building and maintaining the cosmos.
So like the wind, the rain, the fire, they're not just random events, they're expressions of these divas.
Yeah, there's an intelligence behind it all.
So there's a whole hierarchy of these beings. And even matter itself is like a veil over this underlying atmic essence.
Right. And a trained soul can actually learn to manipulate matter by working with these intelligences.
That's pretty advanced stuff.
Yeah. And then there's an even higher group of these flames, the Kumaras, the sons of mind, who brought the sacred scriptures to humanity.
They're like the original teachers.
Exactly. And they're way more evolved than us. They're kind of like our spiritual guides.
Okay. Now, all of this brings us back to this cyclical nature of existence. You know, light becomes darkness, then light again, and souls are evolving through this cycle. But if the goal is liberation, to never return, how does that work with these different manvantaras, these cosmic cycles?
Right. So there's this deeper teaching that Besant alludes to, which suggests that even though individuals can achieve liberation, Brahman itself is constantly unfolding and reemerging in new ways.
So it's like the universe is constantly evolving, even at the highest levels.
Yeah.
And the spark within us, within each individual, it develops through tapas, which means burning, the fire of knowledge and discipline.
Right. It's that active process of purification, burning away the layers of ignorance that obscure our true nature. And as that happens, the flame within us becomes brighter, more aware of its true nature.
So we're essentially refining that spark until it becomes a fully realized flame.
Exactly. And when we achieve liberation, that flame merges back into the source, the universal fire.
So it's like all those individual flames become one again.
Yeah, and that's what liberation is. It's the end of separation, the expansion into infinite knowledge and being.
But Besant clarifies that never returning applies to a specific cycle. So after pralaya, that period of dissolution, everything begins anew.
Right, like the cycle of day and night, or the larger cycles of planets and solar systems. What we learn in one manvantara carries over to the next.
So like our progress isn't lost, it just gets integrated into the next phase of the cosmic evolution.
Right, and, there are even hints that the Indra of the next manvantara will be someone who was overshadowed by Vishnu in this one. And those stories of people meditating underwater for thousands of years and then returning to Earth, those are symbolic of these cycles of activity and rest.
It's amazing how these myths can encode such deep truths.
Yeah. And the rishis, the sons of Brahma, they populate the world in each new manvantara.
Right. And those who are the spiritual teachers in this Manvantara, they'll move on to higher realms in the next one. And those who achieve liberation here, they'll become the sons of fire, the builders and guides for future generations.
It's this grand, interconnected process of evolution.
It's incredible. And Masant encourages us to really meditate on these ideas to get a deeper understanding that goes beyond just the intellect.
Yeah, because it's not just about understanding it mentally, it's about experiencing it.
Okay, so let's talk about yoga. Besant defines yoga as union.
Right. And it's this all-encompassing term that really gets at the heart of spiritual aspiration.
Yeah.
It means possessing all the divine qualities: knowledge, strength, purity, love.
It's like the ultimate goal of human existence.
Exactly. And Besant makes a really interesting point that this yearning for union isn't just a Hindu thing, it's in all the major religions. Like the lives of Christian saints often mirror states of samadhi.
It's like there's this universal drive towards the divine. So to understand this union, we need to understand ourselves, our own constitution, right?
Right. And Besant talks about the sevenfold man, which is a big concept in Theosophy. But she says that the ancient Shastras mostly focus on 5 principles, because the higher 2 are beyond the reach of most people at our current stage of evolution.
Right. But even in those texts, there are hints of the sevenfold nature, like the 7-tongued of flame or the 7 horses of Agni.
Yeah, it's there if you look for it.
So what are the 5 principles that we should focus on?
Well, the common understanding is that Atma, the higher self, takes on 5 sheaths, or koshas, that veil its true nature. In yoga, it's about removing those veils.
Okay, what are they?
So first you have the Annamaya kosha, which is the physical body. Then the Pranamaya kosha, the breath sheath, which is our vital energy.
Okay.
Then the Manomaya kosha, the mind sheath, which is our lower mental nature. And the Vijnanamaya kosha, the wisdom sheath, which is our higher mind. And finally, the Anandamaya kosha, the bliss sheath, which is our causal body, the seat of our deepest self.
Okay, so it's like we're peeling back layers to get to the core of who we are.
Exactly. And Besant also talks about the triple upadis, which are 3 vehicles of consciousness.
Okay, what are those?
So you have the sthulapadi, the gross vehicle, which is our physical body and its subtle counterpart.
Okay.
Then the sushmapadi, the subtle vehicle, which is also called the linga sharira, and this is the vehicle for our desires and our lower mind.
Right.
And finally, the karanapadi, the causal vehicle, which is the sheath of Atma within the higher mind. It's our permanent immortal body.
So these vehicles correspond to different planes of existence, right?
The Stulapadi is associated with the physical and astral planes, the Sushmapadi with the psychic plane, and the Karanapadi with the spiritual plane.
So we experience those different planes through these different vehicles.
Yeah, and the goal of yoga is to master these vehicles, to be able to consciously travel between those planes.
And Besant says the whole universe is there for the soul's development.
It's like this giant playground for our spiritual evolution.
And all karma, good and bad, relates back to Ishvara, the supreme spirit, which is one with the spirit within us.
Yeah, it's all part of this interconnected web.
So mastering those vehicles, that's how we achieve union.
Right, because it allows us to experience all those different aspects of reality and ultimately realize our oneness with everything.
Now, she also connects these vehicles to the different states of consciousness, waking, dreaming, deep sleep.
Right, Jagrat, Svapna, Sushupti. And beyond those is Turiya, the 4th state, which is liberation, pure consciousness.
And the Mandukya Upanishad describes these states as Vaishvanara, Taijasa, and Prajna.
Right, so Vaishvanara is waking consciousness, focused on the external world. Taijasa is dreaming consciousness, focused on internal objects, and Pragya is deep sleep, a state of pure bliss and knowledge. And then there's Turiya, which is beyond all those states.
It's like the ultimate goal of yoga.
Exactly.
Now, for those of us who aren't quite ready for Turiya yet, what are some practical steps we can take?
Well, Besant outlines some preparatory stages. The first and most important is to cease from harmful actions, to purify our lives, be truthful, act with integrity, and cultivate right thoughts and desires.
So basically, be a good person.
Yeah, that's the foundation of any spiritual path. And then we need to discipline our body and mind, to create routines, stick to them, even when we don't feel like it. This strengthens our willpower, which is crucial for yoga.
Willpower is key.
Absolutely. And food also plays a role. We should eat sattvic foods, pure and wholesome, and avoid the rajasic and tamasic ones.
So like a healthy diet for the soul.
Right. And the idea is to gradually lessen the body's hold on us.
Like we're trying to become lighter so we can ascend.
Exactly. And rituals and ceremonies, they're like wings. They can help us initially, but eventually we need to let go of them.
And she warns against judging others.
Yeah, because we never really know what someone else is going through. It's
Right.
better to focus on ourselves, on our own purification.
Good advice.
Yeah. And she talks about pranayama, breath control, which is a powerful technique for withdrawing the senses inward. But she cautions against doing it without proper guidance.
Right. It can be dangerous if you're not careful.
Yeah, especially for people who aren't used to it. And she mentions hatha yoga, which can be very extreme.
Yeah, a lot of those postures are really difficult.
Right. And she says it can develop willpower, but it might not be the best path for spiritual progress in this lifetime. Raja Yoga, the yoga of the mind, is generally preferred because it works directly with the spirit.
Okay. So what are some things we can do on a daily basis to prepare for yoga?
Well, Besant recommends focusing on the idea that the Supreme Soul enters the body at the crown chakra and resides in the right eye, the mind, and the heart. And some practical practices are, first, to concentrate on a mental image until you block out all external distractions.
So like a basic form of meditation.
Exactly. And then to focus on internal objects, ideas, and concepts.
Right. And then the hardest one, to hold the mind steady and resist unwanted thoughts.
Yeah, that takes a lot of practice.
So we're essentially training our minds to become more focused and disciplined.
Exactly. And that lays the groundwork for higher practices.
Now, Besant emphasizes that devotion is really the key to all of this.
Yeah, she says it's the one thing that gives us security, strength, and connects us to the divine within.
It's like the fuel for our spiritual journey.
Right. And she says even simple worship done with devotion is better than no worship at all. And heartfelt offerings are more valuable than elaborate rituals that are done without sincerity.
So it's the intention that matters most.
Exactly.
And she reminds us that the spirit is higher than the intellect, which is higher than the senses. So the spiritual life is the highest, and it's open to everyone.
Yeah, because the spirit is our true nature.
Right. And she encourages us to cultivate reverence for everything that is noble and beautiful, and to worship the divine in whatever form resonates with us.
Because ultimately our goal is to return to that state of pure bliss and unity.
That's a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
Now, Besant also talks about the importance of symbolism, especially in this current age, the Kali Yuga, where there's so much darkness and materialism.
Right. And she says that the ancient sages hid spiritual truths within symbols, myths, and ceremonies to preserve them for future generations.
It's like they created this secret code that we need to decipher.
Yeah. And throughout history, people have come along and interpreted these symbols, reminding humanity of these deeper truths.
It's like these symbols are constantly whispering to us, trying to get our attention.
Right. And the work of the Theosophical Society, according to Besant, is guided by those same divine instructors who created those symbols.
So they're continuing that tradition of revealing the hidden wisdom.
Exactly. And when someone explains a symbol and it resonates with us, it strengthens our faith and understanding. It's like we're remembering something we'd forgotten.
And she uses the example of the cross. She says it's a universal symbol found all over the world, but its meaning has often been degraded.
Yeah. The highest meaning is spiritual, but it's often interpreted in more materialistic ways.
So what is that spiritual meaning?
Well, the circle represents boundless existence, limiting itself in the act of creation. It's the beginning of the cosmos.
And the cross represents fire flashing outward from the center, bringing life and dynamism to that circle.
Right. And it divides the circle into 2, then 4, representing the division of spirit and matter.
And the swastika symbolizes the evolution of the cosmos, that revolution of the cross within the circle.
Yeah. And she connects this to the fire sticks used in ancient rituals. The socket is the circle, the upright stick is half the cross, and the cord completes the cross and creates friction, generating fire.
Right, and that fire is Agni, the god of life.
Exactly. So the completed